Bree, can y'all hear us? This is Ryan, the secretary.
Yes, we can hear you, and all the attendees are on as well.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Since we're doing this remotely, if we could have a roll call for all the members to see who is here. Ms. Rebecca Sullivan.
Present.
Mr. David Worley.
Present.
Ms. An Lee. You may be on mute, Ms. An Lee.
This is Rebecca. It looks like she's still connecting to audio.
Got it. Okay. Mr. Mashburn.
Present.
Okay. And I guess An is still checking in. Okay, while she does that, I'll begin with an invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Heavenly Father, I pray wisdom as we consider extending the State Election Board rules. I just pray that we fulfill your will for the people of Georgia. We pray this in your name. Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America, and to the republic
for which it
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for all. Okay. I know that some of our board members have some questions, but also some of our board members have very tight schedules. And so if we could go ahead, we'll do public comments first. And we'd like to make sure that we limit those on proposed rules because we have a very tight schedule today. Then we'll do the presentation consideration of the emergency rules. And then we'll have the board members, I'm sure you have some public comments about where we are right now. Of course, as we're working through the rules, board members know will be providing their input and guidance on these matters. So
good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Morning.
This is on. I just want to let you know I'm on for the record.
Fantastic. Great. So we have everyone on board. So public comments.
Secretary, this is Ryan. Before we go to public comment, could I make one announcement about a change in the agenda?
Please do.
I think on the agenda, it says we're going to be considering 3 rules after some internal discussions with the Attorney General's office. We're only going to be considering the first 2 rules, the extensions of the already adopted emergency rules on secure absentee ballot drop boxes and the early processing of absentee ballots. We determined with the AG's office that we could do the residency rule as an official election bulletin because we're basically just spelling out authority that registrars already have. So for public comment, the comment should be limited to either the secure absentee ballot drop box rule or the extension of the early processing of absentee ballots. And because of the time commitment that some board members have, if your comment is not limited to one of those things, then we're going to mute you and move on.
Okay. Based on the input about the change in the agenda, can we get a motion to accept the agenda as amended? If a member would like to make that motion, now would be the appropriate time.
This is David Worley. I so move.
Second, Matt Mashburn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion carries. The updated agenda is adopted. Okay, public comments.
All right. Give me 1 second. We're having a little issue where I can't see how to unmute people. It's just asking me to chat right now. So let me fix this really quickly. Okay. I apologize. 1 second. Mr. Secretary? And Ryan, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay. For some reason, Zoom is not allowing me right now to unmute people. So is there any way we can move public comment to after the board?
Yes,
vote?
but it looks like we have no choice. Okay.
Yeah, and let me work this out. All of a sudden, it's not giving me the option to do it. So I'm going to figure this out while we do that.
Okay. We have the proposed rules before us right now. And Ryan, as General Counsel, would you like to go through and explain that? And I guess number one is secure the absentee ballot drop boxes.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, thank you. So the reason we're doing this today, these two rules have been in place since before the primary this year, but they are set to expire a few days before the January 5th election. So rather than basically change how things have been done this year, I think it's the best course of action to continue them through the January 5th election. Yeah, they were both put in place, of course, due to just the massive increase in absentee ballots that Georgia elections experienced this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first one is secure absentee ballot drop boxes. There's no changes to this rule than from what has previously been adopted. So we would just be extending it through. I don't think we want to extend it for the full 6-month emergency rule period, but I think we should extend it 30 days past the January 5th election, because that's how long election officials have to keep the video recordings of the drop boxes. So I would recommend that we adopt this rule, and it'll be in place until February 5th.
Okay. Well, board members, we could take a motion right now and then have comment, or do a comment first. Since we're time is tight today, if there's a motion to adopt this rule, then that would open it up for the members to have discussion. Do we have a motion to approve this?
I have a question, Mr. Secretary, on the camera.
Yes.
The secure. I got word that there's some difficulty in obtaining recordings of these cameras, recordings from the counties, and there's an prohibitive cost to do so. Do we have any feedback on that from how the counties are pulling these records, these video records, and how we're able to, or is there someone taking a look at, or is it easy to get, or people just recording it, or the counties are recording it and not looking at it? Do you have any feedback on that?
This is Ryan. I can speak to it from our investigators have requested the recordings, and they have not been difficult to get. I did hear that I think there's some open records requested to DeKalb County, and I think they were difficult. I would be happy to put something in the rule about how recordings shall be provided free of charge, and as quickly as possible. I know our investigators have not had any issue getting the recordings when we ask for them for an investigation.
Yeah, that would be great. I think to extend this rule, especially now that we have the experience of this previous election for the runoff, to provide access to the videos would be great. So if you can add that to the rule, that'll be great.
There's a part in the rule on it's number it's bottom of page 1, paragraph 5.
Yeah.
Video recordings must be retained, blah blah blah, and shall be made available to Secretary of State investigators upon request. We could make it and shall be made available to Secretary of State investigators or request from the public upon request.
Okay.
And we could even say if we need to add no charge.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing I would caution the board is basically unfunded, mandates about the cost. So that I know that at no charge or but at reasonable, but we don't want to put any kind of impediments making that available to the public. So we have that rule before you. Making a motion, and if you want to make an amendment to what is written there, then I think that would be the appropriate course of action with the appropriate wording that the board so chooses. Do we have a motion at this present time?
I would move to amend the rule to include make available at as early as possible, especially or at the time that's made available to Secretary of State's office investigators, also be made available to the public upon request and at no charge or at reasonable charge that's not cost prohibitive.
Okay, that's a motion. We have a second.
Matt Mashburn, I'll second.
Okay, the motion's before the membership now, board. Any further comments, Mr. Worley or Ms. Sullivan?
This is Mr. Worley. I'm in support of this extension of the rule with Ms.
Okay.
Lee's amendment.
This
Okay.
is Rebecca Sullivan. I don't think we can, by rule, waive the county's ability to charge for these open records requests. Neither Mr. Willard or Ms. Charlene can speak on this meeting, and I don't know if they could chat. But I think to the extent that we're amending this rule to waive the cost of producing the video, I don't think we can force the county to do that.
Why don't we just say shall be made available? We can just leave out the at no charge cost, and then we can just say it shall be made available to the public, and then they just will do it the way they usually handle open records requests.
Well, one of the
And the other thing that I would say is we have not had any issue getting those records. So if we get them from counties, then we'd be happy to make them public as well at no charge.
So would that be the way to do that, Ms. Lee? In other words, we do not, the counties, if they want to charge, then our office would make it available, for the public. And that way we're not placing a financial burden on the counties. Either way, the public wouldn't be charged. They just would request our office once we obtain the records. Would that?
Yes, sir. I just want to clarify. So if a party is interested, if a person is interested in obtaining a certain video, but your office, the Secretary of State's Investigative Division, is not asking for it, is the proper channel then to submit a request to your office, and your investigators will pull it for us, or for those who are interested?
Yes.
And then, okay, and that'll be free of charge, or at least not cost prohibitive? Yes. Okay. Yeah. As long as there's a manner in which an individual or a party can access the videos at a relatively reasonable time, meaning quickly, but also right. at a not cost prohibitive manner, I think that would be okay.
Okay. Can we amend the motion to so state that, and that would require another motion within the motion.
I move to amend paragraph 5 on the rule to read, video recordings of the Dropbox locations must be retained by the county registrars for 30 days after final certification of the election, or until conclusion of any contest involving an election and ballot in the county jurisdiction, whichever, and shall be made available to Secretary of State investigators and members of the public made through the Secretary of State's investigator's office or directly with the county upon request at either no charge or, well, at a reasonable, well, let me think, I'm sorry, as quickly as possible. And such, if there is a charge, it cannot, such charge shall not be cost prohibitive.
Second, Matt Mashburn.
All those in favor of that change and that additional motion?
Aye.
Ms. Sullivan?
Aye.
Okay.
Matt Mashburn,
Motion
aye.
carries. Okay. Motion carries. Now we're back to the main motion with that change in it. Any further discussion?
This is Matt Mashburn. I just have one point of clarification because in this world of tweeting, I can just see the headlines coming out now that the board has allowed people to put ballots in Dropboxes 30 days after the election. I just wanted to be very clear that the 30 days beyond the election only is there for purposes of, that's the time that you have to store the video. It very clearly does not allow people to deposit ballots in the Dropboxes 30 days, up to 30 days after the election. And in fact, the Dropboxes have to be sealed at 7 o'clock on election day. So it doesn't require a change, but I just want to go ahead and stop a misunderstanding before it gets out there.
Thank you for making sure that the public is aware of that, when elections are over at 7 p.m. on election day, and that's it. And so thank you for that clarification. Hearing no other comments or questions, all those in favor of adopting the rule as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next on our agenda.
The next rule is the early processing of absentee ballots. Again, this is a rule that has been in place since before the primaries. This year was in place for the primary and in place for the general election. It's currently in place and it expires a few days before the January election. So it basically puts the counties in a position where they are allowed to early scanning, but then it sort of puts it into doubt whether or not they can continue. The purpose, as the board will remember, was, without doing this early scanning, it would probably take weeks to get the amount of absentee ballots scanned. And there people were upset about the days that it took following the November election. So I think it was a good rule. One thing to make clear is Georgia code does not allow tabulating absentee ballots prior to the close of the polls on election day. So this rule keeps that restriction in place. The counties are allowed to basically open the envelope and scan under this rule. They're not allowed to tabulate the results of the votes until after the polls close on election day. But that's a pretty quick process if everything is scanned through the scanner. One change that we made in the draft that was circulated to you is during the last week of early scanning, it had always been basically counties may do this if they choose to. Of course, we strongly recommended all counties to do it. There was still, as you all will remember, some complaints about how long it took to get absentee ballots posted after election day. So the change in the rule in front of you is that for the last week before the election day, it becomes mandatory to do processing and scanning. Other than that, it's the same, and I would ask that we adopt this emergency rule, I think the number of absentee ballot requests that we're seeing for the for the runoff is large as well. So if we want results at any time quickly, I think we're going to need to do this. And this one really just needs to be in place until a few days after the election. We can just do it. We can really just do it probably through January 5th.
Okay, members, do we have any comments, questions, or a motion?
This is Only. I have one question.
Mhm.
So this was put in place because the general election, we were expecting a record turnout and needed it for timely tabulation. Are we anticipating the same on this runoff election that's coming up, or what's the concern that's driving this need to extend this rule?
So I can tell you how many absentee ballots have been requested for the runoff. I think at this point we're at something like 800,000. We had 1.3 million turned in for the general, 1.1 million turned in for the runoff. As of today, we're at 762,000 for the January runoff, which is, that by itself is already 3 times as many as all of 2018 for a general. So I do think we're going to see a lot of absentee ballots in January as well.
And Ms. Lee,
Yes.
there's really two issues. One is we want to finish up tabulating the election as soon as possible, since the upcoming Congress and Senate will be seated, and so it's really in Georgia's best interest and the nation's best interest that we finish this race up. But also, it was very frustrating. I know from my standpoint is that some counties had kept up with this process and others didn't. And so by making it shall the last week before they leave on Friday, my goal would be that they're all caught up. Then anything that comes in, in the drop boxes or mail, Saturday and Sunday, then when they come back Monday before Election Day, they're going ahead and they're scanning all those absentee ballots. Then more will come in on Tuesday, but the backlog will be so small that when you press the tabulation button, that you can really get your results much quicker. And that, I think, is something that all voters in Georgia are going to very much appreciate. And so I think it really helps it become more timely, and I think that's really helpful also. That was really, my thought on the first, but then also getting Congress and the senators seated so that there's no question on, the upcoming, session.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. From I guess, time and scheduling standpoint for observers, is there a specific time during the day that the counties, I guess the answer right now is they may not have one, but just so that for those observers who are going to be there so they can schedule it more efficiently, is there a set time that the counties are going to be doing this, or is it just any time throughout the day for those that week before the election?
I think that would be already, that would be covered.
That's in the rule.
Yeah.
Well, that's in the rule. They have to give notice of the times and locations of where they're doing the early scanning.
Yeah. I thought, I didn't know if we were considering maybe narrowing that just so that observers who want to send people out can also send during that time. But if it's anytime they want to set it throughout the day, then that's where we are right now with the current rule. I hear your concern, Mr. Secretary. I think if you're anticipating a huge volume of absentee ballots the way we had in the past election, this recent immediate election, then I understand your reasoning for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're at 50% of the general, and we're still fairly early in this cycle. So I believe it'll it's going to be a strongly participated election. So do we have any other comments, questions, concerns, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Secretary, this is Matt Mashburn. One thing with regard to the technical difficulties that we're having with regard to public comment, what I would like is to ask for unanimous consent that if the board is compelled by any comments made during public comment, that the board reserves unto itself the right to revisit and put back on the table these regulations so that the public comment area can be resolved and the public comment can be made. And with that, if there is unanimous consent to that, I make a motion that the regulation be approved as presented.
Unanimous consent to your point raised, and your motion is noted. Do we have a second?
This is Rebecca. I'll second.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion on the rule presented today? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of adopting the updated rule for processing absentee ballots on election day, prior to election day, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Mr. Jeremy, if you could now explain the residency that has been raised because there were some comments out there in the public space about people wanting to move here, not just to help their side get elected, but also move here and vote. And that created a firestorm of controversy, and we wanted to be very clear on this. And so you've had discussions, and if you just want to, flesh that out for the board, that'd be great.
Yes, sir. Yes. So as after the November election, there was comments made about people, moving to Georgia, and some were made, I think, about some probably had no intention to register. Some, based on what they said on kind of social media, did, and it might have been sort of jokey, but it is a serious thing nonetheless, especially with what we were just talking about with all the absentee ballots this year. The problem is that if people sort of take steps to make it look like they've moved to Georgia and haven't actually, and then vote absentee, that can be difficult to catch. It's already in state law that registrars have the ability to determine the qualifications of people who are registering to vote, including being a resident of Georgia and of the county where they are registering. The rule that we had drafted basically, set forth that and set forth the existing process of what they do, what the registrar should do if they have a question about a qualification. That's basically the election code gives the registrar's ability to hold a hearing and subpoena documents to basically answer their question. So the residency rule that we proposed basically does just that. After speaking internally and with the AG's office, we determined that it'd be better to do it as a official election bulletin, because it's just kind of setting forth what's already in the law, rather than an emergency rule. We think that will accomplish the purpose that we want it to.
And we want to have that information out to all of you, because I know that there'll be questions and concerns directed towards you, and this will give you the information that you need. Do we have any further questions about that?
Mr. Secretary, this is David Worley. I don't have any further questions. I would just like to point out that, and I'm sure the official election bulletin will be sure to state the residency requirements as they now are, and not to add any additional requirements or burdens.
That is correct. We follow state law as it is currently written, and that is what we are charged to do. Follow the Constitution, follow the law. Okay, did we have the public comment working now, or if not, can we, many people maybe could put their questions in chat and then you could read those off and then we could field those questions so that at least there'd be an opportunity.
Yes, we have the ability to unmute people now. If you want me to go ahead and get started.
Okay. Yes, please do.
All right. First, we have Sharon Ennis.
Yeah, hi. Thank you all for what you're doing, especially Brad. Thank you so much. A lot of respect out to you guys. My concern is on the video of the ballot boxes. What happens if a recording fails? Because I certainly would not want my vote nullified because of weather or some battery goes down. It's like, what's the implication of a failed recording? Thank you so much. Stay strong.
Okay.
Next, and we'll go ahead and give the answer, provide, ask all the questions, and then we'll go ahead and answer them afterwards.
Okay. Next, we have Terry Manpearl.
My question is about residency. Considering how serious that crime is, voting in Georgia, if you're not from here, have you guys actually found anybody that is guilty of this crime? And if so, have you arrested them? Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have James Nelson.
I wasn't expecting the change on the venue here, or the questioning, but I understand because of all the outrage and suspicion about the voting system. But it's the same type of things that are happening all over the country. What about the absentee ballots that came in with no signatures verified? What about absentee ballots that came in, and are the envelopes available to look at and compare signatures and check IDs? How about a full audit? People are losing faith in us, and we need to do something about that. It's just, there's so many things. I appreciate you letting me say that, and with all due respect, losing my chain of thought, but I'm just very upset with a lot of other people, as you know. And for that election on November 3rd and also the election on January 5th, I'm very concerned, very scared.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Next, we have Chris Smith.
Chris Smith. Next.
Yep, you may have to unmute yourself, Chris Smith.
I'm unmuted. I'm sorry. I see it now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
I can tell you from a constituency in Newton County, we have absolutely No, we do not trust the voting system. I know that people say there's no evidence of irregularities in the electronic system, but I can tell you from a very large constituency here in Newton County, we have no belief that the election will be unfraudulent January 5th. We also believe the timetable for that should be moved. People are on vacation for Christmas, for Thanksgiving with their families, and having to rush back here to vote locally is absurd. With everything going on, this election for the runoff should not take place on the 5th whatsoever. I also believe that the recount that was just committed or done was done sort of like under the cloak of night, sort of like the original election was when everything went down with that. This is a farce, and Georgia has become one of the laughingstock states of the United States, and it's a disgrace. And I'm telling you, I'm not a one person saying this. I can tell you this is from a majority of voters, whether Republican, Democrat, Independent. People want transparency in these elections, and we have no confidence in this system whatsoever. That's all I have.
This is Ryan. I would just say, remember that early voting starts on December 14th, and then goes for those 3 weeks, depending on your county's holiday schedule. So they'll be probably closed on holidays, but just remember, early voting starts on December 14th for the January 5th runoff.
All right. Next, we have Melanie Ray. You may unmute yourself now and speak.
Ms.
Ray?
All right. Next, we'll have
Mr. Secretary, Matt Mashburn.
Yeah.
If I could be recognized, I'm the one who opened the Pandora's box of public comment, apparently, and I want to let the first few speakers go, but I would like to say that if speakers want to have a general statement about the election or their thoughts about the election, there'll be time for that after this regulations considerations. So I think Ryan Germany was proper to say that just general comments about the election are not in order. And so I just apologize for opening it up to general election ideas, but the comments should be limited specifically to these regulations under consideration.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Next person, who was that?
Next, we have Vivian Kirby.
Okay.
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have several questions. There have been irregularities with mail delivery during the November 3rd election here in Cobb County. For instance, I mail a paper check to my condo association, which is local here to where I live, and yet all of these payments arrive late, averaging between 5 weeks to 2 months late, and one of them never even arrived at all. Now, how are we to know if the U.S. Postal Service does not have some rogue workers embedded in them that is tampering with the mail and tossing out ballots that are for President Trump and for other Republican candidates running for office locally? Furthermore, regarding the ballot boxes, who is going to pick up those ballots on election day?
Okay. I'll answer that one. First of all, the United States Postal Service is a federal operation, and it's defined in the United States Constitution that the federal government's responsibility is for post office and post roads. And so therefore, if there's concerns, it needs to be directed to your federal officials. And one of the reasons we have drop boxes is due to COVID, but also the concerns that were raised by national figures about the reliability of the service that they so oversee. And those will be, the ballots are removed from the absentee ballot drop boxes by election officials, official election officials. And all of that is done, with full transparency to make sure that the ballots are secured and brought back to the county election headquarters. Okay, next person.
Next, we have James Woodall.
Good morning. This is James Woodall, the state president for the Georgia NAACP. And I want to provide specific comment regarding this last rule that's been proposed. We have concerns as an organization that does voter registration. We believe that this rule will, in fact, provide space for disenfranchisement of voters who are particularly students who are in Georgia, registered here in Georgia, seniors and retirees that often live in assisted home facilities, and as well as recent transplants to Georgia, among others. This would also provide opportunity for organizations like the NAACP and so many others who work day in and day out to get folks registered to vote all year long, and to suggest that somehow, some way that newly registered voters could possibly be fraud, I think is very dangerous, primarily as it relates to having to prove that they are in fact registered voters, right, outside of what the state already has access to. Additionally, what it also does is it ignores the very real challenge that we have in a public health pandemic, where people have not received any economic relief or anything of that effect, and could possibly be facing eviction to date. And so we have to take that into consideration, because what we don't want to do is create additional rules outside of what the state law already provides that creates additional possibility for disenfranchisement of voters. So I wanted to just bring forward that concern, because what we don't want to do is disenfranchise voters and then make it harder for organizations to do the real hard work of ensuring that democracy works for us all. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, and have a good day.
Thank you.
All right.
Next.
Next, we have Liz Troop.
Thank you. My name is Liz Troop, and I live in DeKalb. The new bulletin on residency, if it reflects the proposed rule, differs from existing statute. 21-217B states that registrars may consider more than a dozen personal factors about a voter before granting them registration. Your proposal greatly increases the registrar's workload, stating that registrars shall consider the 15 different criteria outlined in 21-217A. These newly required criteria favor older, wealthier, better established Georgians. Those who do not own homes, or whose names are not on rental agreements, or who don't have bank accounts, most likely the young and the poor, are most likely to be disadvantaged. Even relocating within Georgia can be a problem for those who can't afford to or are too busy to update their driver's license, car registration, and pay car taxes prior to registering to vote. Yet Georgia registration deadlines are among the most onerous in the country, 29 days in advance of an election. It dictate most disadvantages the young and urban, who are less likely to own cars. Secretary Raffensperger has recently and repeatedly assured the media that he is a Republican and he hopes Republican candidates succeed in current elections. We all know which party the carless, the poor, those who do not own homes, and those working long hours are more likely to support. And these new directives to registrars could not be a more obvious political move against them. Thank you.
Next.
Next, we have Jean Dufort. You may now speak.
Good morning. My name is Jean Dufort. I'm a Morgan County voter. I had prepared remarks to tell you how your emergency paper ballot rule saved the day in Morgan County when none of the poll books would encode ballot access cards. So thank you for your emergency paper ballot rule. I would like instead to address the concern that Board Member Onley raised, and that is the practical observation of early ballot processing. If you've tried to observe early ballot processing as I have, you will understand that most counties post a very broad range of when they might be doing it. They'll post quite a few days, quite a few hours, and in fact, it's actually only happening in a small subset of that. That creates a barrier to effective public access. You know, we're asking volunteers to hang out for an entire week at an election board office in case there might be processing happening, especially in these rural counties where the workload isn't constant like it is in the big metro counties. So I would encourage you, whether through an OEB or otherwise, to make sure that for this election, when all eyes are on what's happening, that counties post effectively when they're going to be doing this, including posting updates. Thank you.
Right. Next
Thank
we
you.
have, I'm sorry. Next we have George Balbona.
Good morning. Look at your driver's license signature. It's terrible, right? You signed it on a beat up electronic signature pad at the DDS. That's the signature used to verify your absentee ballot envelope. SOS states that the number of absentee ballots rejected for signature issues in the 2020 election increased by 350% from 2018. Coincidence? When I vote, I want accuracy above all else, even convenience. Georgia voters should be allowed to sign on paper and have it scanned into the system. SOS Brad often blames Georgia counties for inadequately training poll workers. If only there were a statewide board that handled such election issues. The SEB's top two duties are, one, to promulgate rules and regulations so as to obtain uniformity in the practice and proceedings of superintendents, registrars, deputy registrars, poll officers, and other officials. And two, to formulate, adopt, and promulgate such rules and regulations consistent with law as will be conducive to the fair, legal, and orderly conduct of primaries and elections. What's the point of the Secretary of State wasting Georgia taxpayer money on producing 20 poll worker training videos and a poll worker training manual if there are zero rules requiring Georgia counties to use them? Most counties do not use them, and some Georgia counties don't even know that they exist. OCGA 21-2-99 states that the election superintendent shall provide adequate training to all poll officers and poll workers. What it does not ensure is that all 159 counties are on the same page and following the same rules. Why are Georgia counties not required to use the same training material? Lastly, the errors uncovered by the hand count, a batch of unscanned ballots, and a memory card that wasn't uploaded should have been handled before the hand count started. This should be part of the standard process of generating an accurate ballot manifest, period. If only the SEB took its responsibilities seriously and SEB Brad stopped blaming Georgia counties for their inadequate training. Thank you.
Next.
Next, we have Aaron Evans. Aaron Evans, you may now speak.
Hi, thank you. Gwinnett County resident here. First, Secretary, I would like to say, as someone who did not support you during your election, I have been very impressed by the way that you have handled this election and the transparency that you have given, even with the hiccups that every election will have. So kudos to you and your team. I'm glad that we have tabled the redefining of residency because that would disproportionately affect poor communities and people of color, especially with the vehicle registration rule that was to be possibly accepted. My question is, when will we be able to have public discussion about the voting purging that is currently going on? I hope that your reputation will not be sullied like our current governor with the improprieties that were shown with all the voting purging. And secondly, with this signature match, personally speaking, with my mother who has had a stroke and cannot use her right arm anymore, her signature will not match what is on her driver's license. So how can we know and be assured that her vote will not be discarded because that signature match from 7 years ago does not match what it is today?
This is Ryan. I would just remind, we have board members who have to leave right now. So if your comment is not about the two rules we're considering today, secure absentee ballot drop boxes or early processing, please, there'll be another time for them.
Next.
All right. Next, we'll have David London. You may now speak.
Good morning, everyone. I have a very simple question. Since we're talking about absentee ballots, there's a site that says it's from the Georgia Board of Elections. I just want to make sure that is actually accurate. It is called ballotrequest.sos.ga.gov. Is that your website? I'll put it in the chat box so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Before I share it to anyone, I just want to make sure that's actually yours, because it's not linking to the Georgia My Voter page. And absentee ballots won't be had if that's wrong.
Yes, that's the correct webpage.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
All right. Next, we have Christina Morris. You may now speak.
Hello, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, but in listening to the rules and regulations, I don't really have a comment, but I would hope that in the future that you would even have a special session where we can voice our concerns about what's happening in general with this election, considering that there's runoffs coming up very soon. So I would like to request that there be another public comment venue, since you want to limit comments to the rules today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Rebecca Bennett. You may now speak. Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Bennett.
Okay, so in regards to the drop boxes, is there a way, or are you guys tracking the secureness of the box in regards to dual carry when they're being picked up, when registrars go to the box to pick up?
They have to be picked up by two people. They have to have chain of custody forms the whole time. So yes, that's tracked.
Okay, so if the secure footage shows that only one person got out of the vehicle and two people didn't actually go to the box, yet the forms being filled out, the dual carry was completed, is there a mechanism, or are you guys tracking for where you will go back and rectify that or deal with that, or what are the ramifications for such?
If that's the case, then please make a complaint to our office so we can investigate that.
I have. Okay, and then the other question as far as dual carry, if the post office is not dropping ballots and they are holding them in containers for the registrar to pick up, have you guys wrapped some type of code around what is dual carry to pick those up, or are those allowed to just be one person and not handled under the dual carry process?
Okay. Next.
All right, next we have Patty Bentley. You may now speak.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Secretary Raffensperger, this is Patty Bentley down in House District 139. I had to log off for a quick moment and I did not catch the part of the meeting relating to residency. Can you update me? Did you all vote on that or you postponed that? Did I hear that correctly?
We decided to do an OEB, and we can call you after, Representative.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Next, we have Amy Weaver. You may now speak.
Hi, this is Amy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So first I want to say I'm very happy that, we've decided to table Proposition 3 about the residency proof, but I have a question with regard to when that will be brought back up, because the notice for this meeting, we only had 20 hours notice. So I'm concerned that, the notice for the next meeting or when we're going to be discussing that, could be missed by people who really want to make sure we have voices heard, because that proposition is most definitely, in my opinion, and obviously what I've heard from others and theirs as well, going to disproportionately affect poor people and people of color. And seems a lot like voter disenfranchisement to me. So I want to know
Okay,
when
this is Ryan. This is from now on. People are going to be muted if the comment's not about Dropboxes or
I would just like to know the
early
schedule.
processing. We've got to move on.
Understand. Thanks.
All right.
Okay,
Next, we have Lonnie Hollis. You may now speak.
Okay. My concern is the Dropboxes, and I'm on the board of the for Truth County, and it seems that it concerns the plaintiff too. But for the election, our supervisor limits our ability to do our job as far as the election is concerned. So I'm very concerned about that, and I would like to talk to someone else at another time about how we are to operate as a board.
We'll have our elections division reach out to you, Ms. Hollis.
All right, next we have Helen Butler. You may now speak.
Good morning. My comment was with reference to the residency. Ms. Troop and Reverend Woodall gave my assessment.
Okay.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we have Bridget Thorne. You may now speak.
I'm here. Hello. I'm a Fulton County Precinct Manager who's tech certified for 9 years. I'm concerned of the lack of security of paper ballots for early voting and voting. Due to the COVID-24, County House employees were quarantined and Dominion Software was running the Fulton County Election Warehouse. Let me explain the lack of security I saw when I spent 6 days as a tech in the temporary warehouse at Georgia World Congress Center. My main job was to print test ballots. We printed these ballots on official roll and voting paper. There was no difference between test ballots and real ballots. Ballots would get lost. We would make mistakes, so we would have to reprint ballots. I would spoil mistake ballots, but this was not a practice. On one day, I went through the
Okay.
Next. Next. Are we there?
Yes, we're here. Just some people have logged out that signed up. Next, we have Amy Zahu. You may now speak.
Hi, yes, I would like to say that need to give us some confidence because you need to remove illegal voters first, and then give us confidence to come out to the to voting during the runoff. Yeah, you need to do a cleanup on all the existing voters. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
This is Ryan, Secretary. I understand there's still over 100 commenters. I know some board members had hard stops at 9. I think we unfortunately need to move on. We're not hearing any comments related to the rules, or at least very many. And we can, people can always, of course, reach out to our office with their comments and any specific allegations to investigate. Please, we encourage you to do that.
Yeah, the purpose of this meeting this morning was to really extend the deadlines for the absentee ballot drop boxes, to clarify the residency rule that would be done through an OEB rule, and the other rule. I know that we came through this election, and it was very contentious, and concerns were raised, and there'll be another time for the state election board to, hear the public comment specifically about that. And so we'll set that up and have that meeting. And that with COVID restrictions, I don't know if we'll be able to do that in person, but that is my preferred way of doing it. But at the very least, we'll set up another Zoom meeting for the people to be heard. And if there's no other, public comment this time, let's go ahead and I do know that some of the board members do want to comment on some issues. And I think that would also, for the public, answer maybe some of the questions they have. I know that some of the members wanted to speak to certain issues. Ms. Sullivan, would you like to add any comments, or Mr. Worley?
I would like to say a few things, Mr. Secretary. First of all, I'd like to compliment you for the transparent way in which the election was conducted and the audit was conducted. We have heard some comments today with people who are unhappy with the election, but I've heard very little specifically pointing to any irregularities that they are unhappy with. If people do have information about irregularities in the election, they need to bring it forward. That really has not been the case thus far that I'm aware. Secondly, the concerns that some people have expressed about in the written chat that is going on right now, relating to signatures on absentee ballots. We have a process in this state whereby people who vote absentee have their signatures checked when they apply for an absentee ballot, and again when the absentee ballot is returned. And that process is conducted by nonpartisan election officials, employees of the local election boards in 159 counties. That is a fair and open process, and it's one that has been required by law in this state for decades and decades. Nothing has changed in that process, and that is a safeguard that voters in this state can rely on. So I just think it's important to make that clear. There is a lot of misinformation that is being spread all across social media by people who have an interest in stirring up satisfaction with the election result. But the fact is that Georgia conducted a free, fair election, and the results are clear to the entire world. I think I would like to have an opportunity to hear from voters in a public forum with their concerns about the election, and an opportunity for us to respond, for the secretary and the election board members to respond to some of the concerns that people are expressing. Because I think it's important that we be able to put out correct information about that. So I am available whenever the secretary is available to have that meeting between now and the runoff. That's all that I'd like to say, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. I agree. We have Thanksgiving week this week, but within the 2 weeks after, then I think that'd be appropriate time to have another meeting to air out these issues so the public can be heard. Okay. Ms. Lee, I believe, has already stepped out. She had a meeting. Mr. Mashburn, do you have any comments you'd like to share?
Yes, yes, sir, Mr. Secretary. With your permission and indulgence, I would move that we adopt the Dropbox regulation and then reserve unto myself the right to make comments after the vote is conducted, if that's acceptable to you and the other board members.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, this is David Worley. We adopted the Dropbox regulation.
Yeah, I thought we dropped.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then
Yeah.
I apologize. Well, then I thank you. I was thinking 3 and we had 2. That's right. You're right. Okay.
Right.
I apologize to everyone. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate the opportunity to set the record straight on a lot of misinformation that Mr. Worley spoke about in general. I would like the opportunity to take a few minutes to speak about it in particular terms, and I ask my fellow board members' indulgence in that. But I think it'd be helpful in that I'm getting a lot of calls from legislators and senators, members of the General Assembly, who want to have answers to questions that they can give to their constituents, and this is a good time for that. So with the fellow board members' indulgence and your indulgence, Mr. Secretary, the first thing I'd like to talk about, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. The first thing I'd like to mention is there's been a lot of comment on on social media that the purpose is that some judge is going to declare the true winner of the election. And the only remedy in Georgia for state elections is a new election. There's no remedy where a judge is going to declare who the true winner is. That just doesn't exist under state law. And when you're electing the president, there's been this allegation that we're going to have a new election and the Supreme Court's going to set aside the election and we're going to have a new election. But the Constitution provides for election day. And so there will be no new election declared by the Supreme Court. So let's go ahead and dispense with that one. For the first time in the state's history, as part of the settlement of complaints against Fulton County arising from the primary, the state election board appointed an election monitor over Fulton County. This election monitor was allowed to go anywhere he wanted to go and see anything he wanted to see. In fact, when I'll talk about that in just a minute, but also for the first time in Georgia state history, we have voter inspected and approved paper receipts for all computerized voting. That when recounted, confirmed the machine count well within the tolerance for human error was correct. Another misconception that I hear all the time is that the board created voting by mail just for this election. That is incorrect. Georgia does not have vote by mail. It never has had vote by mail, and I don't think it ever will have vote by mail. but other people disagree with me on that point. But we do have absentee voting, no excuse absentee voting that was created by the Republicans many years ago, where voters can mail their ballots back, or as we've been talking about today, drop them off in drop boxes. Now, with regard to specific allegations that you've been hearing all over the internet, I want to address three very important ones first. The first one was the allegation that has been tweeted out by very respected members of the parties that Fulton County was fraudulently counting ballots in secret on election night. Well, as I just mentioned, for the first time ever in Georgia history, an election monitor was accountable to the board, was stationed in Fulton County. They actually sent a picture, and nobody seems to know this, so let's get this out there and let the public know. But he sent a picture on election night standing in the room at State Farm Arena where the counting was taking place, with the time written on the piece of paper that he was sending. So the election monitor was there. There was no counting in secret, period. I was at English Avenue location from 7 p.m. till 3 in the morning the next morning, and I knew that they were counting in Fulton at State Farm Arena simply by listening to what was going on in front of me at English Avenue. Between me and the elections director of Fulton County were seated at least 4 Republican tabulation monitors. I don't know what their contact with the party was, but I knew that the county was still counting in State Farm Arena from where I was standing, and they were between me and the people making these statements. So if I knew it, I don't know if they knew it or not, but I knew it. In addition, every county has at least one Republican on the Board of Elections with the power to go anywhere they want to go and see anything they want to see. And Fulton actually has 2, not just 1, but 2 very competent, very diligent Board of Election members. The next allegation has been one of the most dramatic ones, and it's repeated repeatedly on TV. I just saw it the other night. And that was, we caught the Secretary of State red-handed shredding fraudulent ballots in Cobb County to cover up the evidence. Well, this one has a lot of problems. First of all, the Secretary of State has absolutely no control over Cobb County's shredding contract or the schedule that they have for shredding. It appears that someone simply drew a conclusion from seeing the normal and expected shredding truck during the normal and expected post-count shredding. And in fact, Cobb County has posted on their website a detailed explanation for anyone and everyone to see that contains a list of exactly what was shredded. The other problem with this allegation is that it makes absolutely no sense. Everybody in the world expected that the president was going to request a recount. They call it an automatic recount, but you have to request it in writing, so it's not really automatic. That's a recount by right. So if there really were shredded ballots, that would result in differing results from the previous 2 counts, which you would think the president's team, in the hope to sow doubt on the election, would hope would happen. So it makes absolutely no sense that people would shred ballots knowing that a recount was coming. Coincidentally, on the exact same day, I had my monthly regularly scheduled shredding truck in my driveway shredding paper, just like normal. It was the exact same day. I'm glad nobody was in my driveway taking pictures and posting it on the internet that the election board member was caught red-handed shredding illegal ballots. The next allegation is also a very serious one. It also involves Fulton County, and I have personal knowledge about it. So let's go ahead and resolve that issue. The allegation is that Fulton County was creating and counting thousands of fraudulent ballots hours after they were supposed to have been finished. Well, the true explanation of this one happened right in front of me, so I know the answer. On Wednesday night at 7 p.m., the elections director announced that they had 30,000, in a press conference, announced that they had 30,000 ballots left to count. Both I and the election monitor were standing right there together when this press conference took place, and we both compared notes and knew that Fulton County was processing ballots at approximately 2,000 ballots per hour. They've been doing it all day for at least the past 6 hours. So that meant 30,000 divided by 2,000 per hour. That meant that 15 hours were left before they were finished. But the elections director, unfortunately said they would be finished by midnight, which was 5 hours away. So anybody paying attention to what he was saying knew that they had at least 10 hours more left to count. I even thought to myself at the time, well, that's going to cause some suspicion when they're nowhere near finished at midnight, and in fact still have 20,000 ballots left to count after the midnight deadline that they just announced for themselves. So I knew that was going to be a problem. The next allegation is one that you've heard a lot, is that Dominion voting system is programmed to flip votes. Well, for the first time in Georgia's history, we have paper receipts that are reviewed and approved by each voter. We counted them, and there was no material difference between them and the machines. You expect a human error to be introduced into the system of approximately 1%, but the count that we had was approximately 0.1%, so much smaller than that. The next allegation was that multiple counties found thousands of votes for the president, which hadn't been counted, but none for Biden. It was only the president's votes that had not been counted. Well, that's not true. That's based on the mistake in the reporting of the net Trump pickup in these counties. Both candidates picked up ballots. There were 3 memory cards that were found with votes on them, and only in Floyd was there an actual stack of ballots. One of the memory cards is a simple explanation, just like Occam's razor. The simple explanation is usually the most accurate one. And that was, there was an early voting precinct where the card ran out of memory, so they swapped it out. They failed to recognize that they had 2 cards to account for rather than the one that they had in the machine. It should have absolutely been caught, and it was caught ultimately during the recount, or the audit, the risk limiting audit. So let's take another allegation that I've heard repeated over and over again, and that was workers were or could have fed multiple stacks of ballots in heavily Democratic counties through the machine multiple times. Well, that would have caused an imbalance in the results. You would have had too many votes and not enough voters. So that's just, if the election results tally sheets balance, then that can't be true. The next one you hear is a very fantastical argument that Dominion was created to cement communist rule and power in Venezuela. Well, that may or may not be true. I don't know. I haven't seen proof of it yet, but it's irrelevant as to tabulation in Georgia. We have paper receipts reviewed and approved by the voters. So, and the machine matched the human count with regard to the risk limiting audit that the Secretary of State wisely selected for the presidential race. And he wisely selected that we wouldn't count selected ballots, we would count them all. So credit to the Secretary of State for making a wise decision. The next fantastical allegation that we hear over and over again in the media, and especially on television, is that the CIA created hammer and scorecard to throw the elections in other countries and sow chaos. Again, that is absolutely irrelevant as to tabulation in Georgia because we have paper receipts, counted and reviewed. The most fantastical allegation of all was this allegation that I was sent multiple times that the New York Times online website data proved that Biden cut into the Trump margin at completely improbable regular intervals of precisely 4,800 votes each. Well, I looked at that source. It actually comes from the headline of a newspaper of a 10,000 circulation in central Louisiana. And actually none of the data that's provided in the news article after that headline has any vote in a 4,800 vote interval, not a single one. And actually the vast majority of the data points they cite are not anywhere near 4,800. So that one's just ridiculous. The allegation has been, and we've even heard this today, that the risk limiting audit was a joke, a sham, and a fraud, unless you reunited the absentee ballot envelopes with the ballots before you began. I've been through a lot of recounts, and no one has done this or even suggested it a single time. because it's impossible to do. You can't reunite the ballots with the envelope cards because that would violate the secret ballot. The next thing, the next allegation that you hear is that the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State did away with signature checking in Georgia. That is absolutely false. And actually, the signature checking was strengthened. So finally, the last allegation that we hear is that Democrat strongholds cheated for Biden and show improbable spikes in their votes. Well, remarkably, I took a look at this myself and using statements readily available from the Secretary of State's office, public record. Remarkably, every heavily Democratic county in Georgia had absolutely consistent margins to 2016. DeKalb County, the margin was 0.7 difference between 2016 and 2020. This is all on the public record. So in fact, every major city in Georgia and every major Democratic stronghold in Fulton, DeKalb, Bibb, Chatham, Richmond, Muskogee, and Clark counties had remarkably similar margins against the president's margin as in 2016. The counties that had remarkably worse results for the president were Cherokee, Forsyth, Spalding, Douglas, Gwinnett, Cobb, and Henry. And so basically all of the suburbs show data that the president did substantially worse than he did in 2016. This was reported prior to the election, widely reported, and candidates would call me all the time and say, we're having trouble in the suburbs. So that result came out very similar to what was being reported. So in summation, by the time this election is done, we will have the most looked at, checked, double checked, after the recount, triple checked, and examined election possible that has ever been possible in Georgia's history, due in large part to the tools that we have for the first time ever for this election. And I know that was a long explanation, but it's time to start knocking down these wild conspiracy theories with facts. And I appreciate the board's indulgence as I went through that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Mashburn. You really help provide background information for everyone. Board members, I know that you really stepped out and stepped up, and sometimes you must feel like you've maybe stepped into it a little bit. And just really grateful for your commitment to the voters of Georgia and also the people of Georgia. Hearing no new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
This is David Worley. I'll second that motion and vote in favor.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, this is on. I'm still in the meeting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Do you have any comments you'd like to add before we adjourn?
No, sir.
Okay. All those in favor of adjournment, please do so by signifying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.